History is a mirror, and when I reflect on my Tacoma days, my joy and my sacrifices, my hopes and my scars, I'm reminded when I'm so happy to be here in Tacoma, to build upon the generations of Black people before, crafting my life like a work of art, never neglecting what's important. You see, I've learned that Tacoma is about faith. When I came to Tacoma, it rained. The clouds were crying under pressure, like they'd never see spring again. But we always see spring after the winter of our discontent. But we always survive, knowing perseverance is our strength. To be and to do, we must know, because knowing is half the battle. Knowing.
I remember seeing myself in a bright white coat that had fur on it. So it must have been in the winter with my hood up, and I was on the east side because that's where we moved when I came to Tacoma. And I just remember being a little girl growing up on the east side.
My first Tacoma memory is that February of 1967, I arrived here in the military. I took a bus from SeaTac to McCord Air Force Base on a Wednesday. And that Saturday, I took a Greyhound from McCord Air Force Base to downtown Tacoma on Pacific Avenue. I walked up and down Pacific Avenue for about 4 hours, and then I got on the Greyhound bus and headed back to McCord.
Well, when we initially moved to Tacoma as a child, I was 3, I think, and we lived in University Place at first. But one of my first memories is we lived in a pink house on Bridgeport Way that's no longer there, and my first memories, I think, are at that house.
When I think about Black Tacoma, I think about a number of people. As we sit here in the Urban League today, I think about my mentor and a man I look up to and care about so deeply, and that's Thomas Dixon. But I also think of my dad. I talked earlier about my father, the man who gave birth to me, but my mother and father divorced when I was young, and in my adult life, I then met Harold Moss, who recently passed away. And shortly after meeting Harold, we quickly became not just co-workers, because I actually worked for Harold, but he became my father. He became my dad. And so I think about people like Tom Dixon and Harold Moss, those who paved the way for us to be here today. But I can't say I think about one person when I think about Black Tacoma, because I think about people like Dolores Silas and Ella Mae Crawford and Jim Walton and Lau Kwa Sim. And I think it's hard to just narrow it down to one person, because I've been so blessed to have so many of our elders in my life. But if I had to pick one, as much as I love Tom Dixon, I would be remiss if I didn't name my dad, Harold Moss.
Mayor Moss, who recently passed away, he had a tremendous impact on this city. And for me, he really embodied what it meant to not just be a man, but be a Black man. I remember I marched alongside him at the 50th anniversary at the March on Selma here in Tacoma. And I didn't realize that I'd be walking next to him, but as I stood next to him and as I held his hand and we marched across the 11th Street Bridge, I remember him saying to me in my ear, he said, "Never forget that your life matters and my life matters." And that stuck with me, and that's what it means to be Black in Tacoma, Black in America. We must never forget that our lives matter.
The thing I miss most about Black Tacoma's past, and probably the thing that I will be most emotional about, are the people who have, in fact, passed. there have been tremendous individuals, and if I start talking about them, people want to know that you will cry. They don't want to see you cry. So what I miss most are my friends in the struggle, my friends who have dedicated their life to the uplift of Black people in this community, and who never gave up, who never quit the struggle.
My grandmother, Miss Odell Scott, moved here from Little Rock, Arkansas, and purchased a few homes, and she used to sell collard greens out of the trunk of her car to help support her family. And she ended up purchasing a duplex in Tacoma on the hilltop and raised so many generations of my relatives, cousins, my aunties and uncles. And if it were not for her and her success and her ability to fight despite the odds, my family wouldn't be here. And there's so many matriarchs and patriarchs of Tacoma, historical Tacoma families. And we don't talk about these people enough, but my grandmother was a community advocate and did a lot for our family and the community. So that's one story that I think more people should know.
For Dr. Dolores Silas. And Dolores Silas was one of, if not the first Black administrator in Tacoma Public Schools. And I think that she's another person who embodies Tacoma Blackness, work ethic. She moved on to be involved in the city council and city government. And so she took her experience working in education and brought it into an even bigger bureaucracy. Education's a big bureaucracy, but obviously the city is even more detailed.
Its genesis, a lot of people see its genesis in what was called the Mother's Day riots in Tacoma in the 60s, in the late 60s. And it's gone through several name changes. But the Black Collective has been an all-volunteer organization, and your only requirement to be a member of the Black Collective is that you are Black. And I think that is the genius of this organization, is that we don't have a hierarchy. It's a fairly level organization. You come and engage at the level that you want to engage. You can come and sit and just be a consumer, an observer. You can come and work 10, 20, 30 hours a week if you want to. There's work at the Black Collective, and we invite people to come to be a part of us. And we're here all the time. We meet 52 Saturdays a year, and we've done it for over 50 years. And so we're always on. We can always count on us to be available, and we are a collective of all the different interests in Tacoma. And you can be conservative, and you can be moderate, you can be radical, but you're still a member of this family. And so it's a big tent, and we try to be as elastic as we can to deal with all the attitudes and opinions that people have. And I think that's what makes the Black Collective extremely viable.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Black Collective. This was a group that I was not familiar with as a kid, but as I became an adult and I wanted to do more in the community, I was exposed to this group. And I truly believe that Black Tacoma would not be where it was if it were not for the Black Collective. And to me, the Black Collective represents so many things to so many different people. But to me, the Black Collective represents mentorship. So when you take kids who either are orphaned or grew up in the foster care system, or they don't have anyone in their family to lean on, there's so many great mentors, men and women, Black men and women in the Black Collective that continue to pull young people up and help them and guide them and teach them, and they continue to build bridges. And so for me, that's it. The Black Collective and its ability to act as a guide for the next generation and the next generation. And they've been doing that for 60 years.
So the future of Tacoma, first of all, depends on us. Who we are, what we can do, and what skills and abilities that we bring to the struggle. But the future of Tacoma also depends on people outside the Black community. That the ability to take on the issues of institutional racism. Most people don't have a really clear understanding and appreciation of how impactful institutional racism is. They say, well, if you get a person on the city council or the mayor, or we've had 3 mayors who have been African Americans. Well, I think everything must be pretty okay within the Black community. No, the institutions that have been built up over the last couple of 100 years in the Pacific Northwest still rule the day. And in order for us to be successful, we have to have assistance in dismantling institutional racism, and that requires not just Black folks, but people of color, and most importantly, the main beneficiaries of institutional racism, those are white people.
Frankly, it depends on people like me, but not just me. It really depends on our entire community. And I can tell you at this time in history, in this moment, I've never been more proud of Black Tacoma. I've never been more proud of the way that we've stood up and made our voices heard about the injustices in our community. And I've never been more sad about Black Tacoma. So often, as a former president of this incredible urban league, and as someone who's worked in the Black community for so long, as we watch things happen across the country, as we watch George Floyd and murders of Black and brown bodies across this country, I never thought it would happen in Tacoma. And we've now had our own incident. And so that makes me sad, because I never thought I'd live in a community that would face the same issues that are across this country. But we always said not if, we always said when. But despite the sadness, I'm so proud to live in a city where we're back to back. We elected 2 Black women as mayors. But I'm also sad that it took us from Harold Moss to Keith Blocker to get another Black man elected to the city council. But I am proud that there are 2 Black people who sit on the city council. So when I say the work depends on us, it's because it does, but because we're sitting in those seats. Harold has now passed the baton, and we're sitting in those seats, and it's up to us to take that baton and make the changes that our community so needly deserves. But it also depends on all of Black Tacoma, because it isn't just about 2 people doing the work. It's about how are we going to hold everybody accountable in this community to remove all of the barriers that make it difficult for us to achieve our destiny in a place that we call the City of Destiny. What are we doing, and how are we holding people accountable? And not that it's up to all of us to do the work, because let's be clear, if we could do the work and make it all happen, it would have been done. But it's up to this entire community, not just to the Black members of this community, but to every member of this community who understands and sees the injustices that happen. And maybe not even understands, but wants to be a part of changing what they know to be wrong. And so what gives me hope over the course of what's been happening across the country and the uprising of the Black Lives Matter movement is how Tacoma has shown itself in this movement. While we've had tens of thousands of people march in our city, we've not had the violence, but we've had the demand for accountability. And I want us to continue to demand that accountability, and not just from other electeds, but from people just like me.